It's a pleasure, everyone, to have a very special guest with us today. We've had some very nice guests over the last few months as we have been preparing to launch Vistage Israel. But Todd is the president of Tech in Canada. Now, Vistage was known as Tech before, up to about 15 years ago, Tech meaning the executive committee, and Vistage in the US changed its name from Tech to Vistage, but Tech in Canada has continued. And Todd, it is a great pleasure to have you with us today.
Well, thanks, Boaz. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you.
I'm trying to remember, Todd, how many years ago did we meet? It's been a long time.
Well, you know what, Boaz, I hate telling you this because, of course, it just means that the years are going by on both of us, but it's been almost 9 years when I launched my first tech group, and you were one of my first speakers at my first retreat in Victoria, British Columbia.
I remember. What a beautiful setting we were there. And so, Todd, please tell everyone where you're originally from, what part of Canada?
Well, actually, I grew up in a city known as Kitchener, just outside of Toronto. You're probably familiar with at least Toronto, and Kitchener's just a little bit west of Toronto. But quite frankly, I had a passion for Western Canada. So not long into my life, probably just after graduating from college, I headed west and been out west in Calgary, Alberta now for many, many years. This is clearly home now.
What took you specifically to Calgary, Todd? What was it about Calgary? I've never been.
Well, initially, of course, that was work. So my background, of course, was I was a former executive and CEO for different organizations, and kind of clawed my way through the corporate ranks, as lots of us have done over life. And one of the organizations I was with was expanding in Western Canada, and asked me if I would take on a position opening up the Western Canadian marketplace. So I said yes, and fell in love with Western Canada. And of course, met my wife, Barbara, of now 33 years in Edmonton, Alberta. So, and of course, as they say, the rest is history.
Absolutely. And you all have a family, you have kids?
Yeah, two kids, of course, growing up now, both off doing their own thing. And of course, 27 and 28. My daughter's 28. She works with an airline here in Canada. And of course, that's probably not an industry that you really want to be tied to these days, unfortunately. But that too will recover, I'm sure, as time goes on. And my son followed his passion. He went to university in Finland, of all places, and has a deep passion for hockey and coaching. He played a lot of competitive hockey, and then he became a hockey coach. So he's coaching hockey here in Canada as well. And of course, hockey is pretty well second nature to Canadians over here, as you probably can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And Todd, when did you first get exposed to tech, and how?
So maybe just to share a little bit of that story, Boaz. About 15 years ago, I had a wonderful event in my life, as many of us have enjoyed. As I think about this community of tech and Vistage. So many successful men and women who come into this organization from all kinds of incredible backgrounds, CEOs, business entrepreneurs, business leaders, executives. And of course, I was no different. I had an opportunity 15 years ago to have a big event in terms of a business event. I was involved with a private equity firm, Bain Capital, allowed me the opportunity to use a word which is now stricken from my vocabulary. But at the time, the word was retire. I said, I'm going to retire. And the reality is now I don't know what that means. And then I called it, I said, well, this was 15 years ago, I called it unplugged. And then as I quickly realized, let's just call it what it was. I was lost. I didn't know what to do next in life. I had spent my entire year as a CEO and business leader, and I was trying to search for what might I do next. I read a book, did a lot of different things, but I read one particular book that resonated with me. It was Daniel Pink's book, To Sell As Human. And in that book, he talks about having a sentence in life. And so for me, I wrote down, after much work, wrote down a sentence. And that sentence is assisting others achieve success as they define it. And from that day forward, after writing that sentence, assisting others achieve success as they define it, that became kind of my purpose in life, if you will. And along that journey, I was searching for things that only connected to that sentence. Well, as to your question, Boaz, I met through a mutual friend who you and I both know, Mickey Williams. I met the CEO of of Tech Canada at the time. Her name is Catherine Osler. So Mickey and Catherine and Todd go out for dinner. That's about 9 years ago. Have a wonderful dinner. And Catherine Osler says to me, "You should be a Tech Canada chair." And to be totally candid, I said, "I don't know what that is. I have no knowledge of tech. Don't know what this model is all about. Tell me more." So of course, she sat over dinner and had a lengthy conversation telling me about the model, and you have one-to-one coaching, and we have these group experience where men and women from a wide range of industries come together and share ideas and gain perspective. We have these unbelievable speakers, that come in and give us rich content inside of a curriculum-based educational model. And of course, we're part of this national and international community, which just got bigger. And of course, all of that story, as was shared with me, I was kind of convinced that, okay, I'll give this a go. And of course, remember, I was coming out of my state of lostness. So I remember my wife, Barbara, saying to me, "Is this just another one of those things that you're going to go try?" And I said to myself, I'm going to circle a date in the calendar 6 months out. That's when I'm going to be launched as my first Tech Canada group. And I did it. I had my first CEO group launched within 6 months, and I was never looking back.
So how many groups eventually did you create before you became president of Tech Canada?
Yeah, it's interesting, Boaz. At the time, I thought, I'll launch a group, and I did launch that group, as I referenced, CEO group, and I thought, okay, well, that's going to be good enough. But something that's interesting that happens inside of this model. It's almost magical, where I started to meet more men and women that were either second in command or an executive or a director of the men and women that I was coaching. And suddenly I thought, well, maybe I could build a second group. Of course, I was being asked, "Would you coach me? Would you coach me?" And I thought, well, I didn't really want to expand a coaching practice. I wanted to stay focused on this model. So I started my second group, which was a key executive group, shortly after my CEO group. And then, of course, as things happen in life, I continually met men and women that weren't big enough in terms of their revenues and what have you, and to join my CEO group. But they too, had this need for, coaching and being part of this model. And of course, in keeping with that sentence in life of assisting others achieve success as they define it, it was a natural for me. So I started my third group, and it was a small business group. Well, shortly thereafter, Dr. Lynn Tanner, who's the founder of Tech Canada, asked me if I would explore, as my marketing background, explore a model, a variation of the small business model. So I did that. And modified the small business model inside of Canada. And then, of course, I thought, well, if I modified this model, I better start a fourth group to test the model. So at one point, I had 68 members, executive leaders, CEOs, and business owners under 4 different groups that I was coaching and having the time of my life.
Yeah. And what's been your most gratifying point about being a tech chair, would you say, Todd?
Well, there's many, Boaz, and even when I address our community today, obviously, putting on the other hat as Tech Canada's president and CEO, and talk to our men and women that coach inside of this model, and our chairs. We're now 80 chairs across Canada and 36 building chairs. So we've grown tremendously. But even when I talk to those men and women that are considering this work, I'm hard pressed to tell you one thing. I will say that the global comment that you'll hear often from anybody that does this work, it's the most rewarding work that I've ever been involved with. When I was trained, there was a fellow by the name of Peter Buchanan. Boaz, I'm sure you know Peter, and Anita, you might know Peter as well. He's been a chair in our environment for many, many years, and he trained me. And he said to me, Todd, sometimes you're going to feel like you're a counselor, a coach, a rabbi, a priest, you name it, you're going to feel you're part of all of that. And I thought, I don't think so. I'm a businessman. I'm a business coach. That's what I'm going to be focused on. But when you embrace this model, which is really grounded on vulnerability, which I know is a core element of authenticity, which is great for all of you, I'm sure, and connects with all of you. When you embrace that model, and suddenly you have this personal and professional growth that materializes right inside of a one-to-one, right in front of you. There's a caring that takes place with the men and women that you're coaching that clearly is, as I said, most rewarding work that I've ever been involved with.
Amazing. Well, I've seen you in action in front of your groups, Todd. You're amazing. You just have a way with you that's just awesome. And so what we've got happening this week is very exciting, Todd, because 3 of our candidates, James, Amir, and Yossi, are going to be doing Chair Academy starting Wednesday, virtually out of the UK. Jackie will be going through training in late April. And so we're just delighted with getting to know these fine folks, and we want to open it up to have them ask you some questions. So James, any kind of a question for Todd about Vistage and building groups and so forth? And then we'll go to Amir.
Hey Todd, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Nice to meet you, James.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, hi everybody. So yeah, I guess I think my best question would be: let's pretend you were us, and if you could give us, if you could do 2 things, and I'm going to talk macro here. It doesn't have to be micro stuff. It doesn't have to be the technical stuff. I think more on the behavioral level and the mindset level. If there were 2 things that you would tell your younger self to make this thing work, or you tell us, what would they be?
Yeah, excellent. No, it's a great question. It's a question, quite frankly, that connects with me as I'm asked that question from our own building chairs in Canada. It's interesting. I just want to put a kind of a caveat under this. And as much as I'm sure many of you are thinking, in Israel, nobody knows Vistage, nobody knows tech, and I would argue that that's the exact same comment that is made, despite the fact that Tech Canada has been around for 35 years. Nobody knows tech. I hear that all the time. So an organization that's been around for 35 years still is fighting the same issue that I think all of you will be fighting if you allow it to be present. And I guess that's my first comment, is that know that the men and women that you're going to be coaching inside of this model, right? First off, this model works. It's absolutely proven. 57 years, 35 years, pick the landmarker that you want to cling to. This model works. There is an abundance of stories around you, and you don't have to have your own story to have the conversation about how the model works. So gravitate to a story that's all around you, whether it be in Vistage. Anita's probably has many from her own experience. Cling to those stories that you can share with the men and women that you're talking about. But to answer your question, so here's what I tell men and women that are thinking about this work. If you're building a group, it doesn't work off the side of your desk. So in other words, you have to be focused on the build process. The work gets easier. It never gets easy. I tell men and women that are thinking about this, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So here's the good, and I've already talked about it. The good is that this will be the best work that you've ever been involved with in your life. And I guess my challenge to you is that if it's not, then give me a call and talk to me, because I haven't talked to anybody that gets launched and it starts working with men and women that doesn't answer it in that way. Most rewarding work that you've ever been involved with. That's the good. The bad is if you're right now thinking, boy, I don't like the sales thought. I don't like that I have to go out there and talk about myself and talk about this process. Well, you're always going to do that. Like that's this model. The model is built because if you think about it, I've watched my good friend Stephanie Christopher, who's Tech Australia. She and I talk lots, and at one point we were challenging one another about, well, maybe we would just build groups and then give them the chairs. It just doesn't work, because I'll tell you why. The men and women that are considering this work, they're going to sign up because of you. Because Dr. Tanner tells me, here's an 82-year-old man, 35-year founder of our organization. It's the confidence that's displayed by you. So you have to show up with the confidence, because that window of time, and by the way, that's literally the window these days, because certainly in Canada, our guys are building through the virtual environment, but they lean in. It's that confidence that I'm going to sign up for initially. Now, I'm going to stay because of the men and women that you've selected to stay in the group, but I'm signing up because of you. So this doesn't work off the side of your desk. You really have to be focused, I guess is my comment. In other words, you can't be doing a bunch of other things thinking, maybe, a couple hours a week I'll spend building my group here in Israel. It doesn't work that way, right? You've got to be focused. So that's my first comment. I said the good, the bad, and the ugly. The ugly is that members, as you get going in this process, members will leave you. Even the best stats of our master chair community run at about 90% attrition or 10% attrition rather, turnover rates, 90% retention rates. So you're going to have between 10 and 20% turnover, and that's just a fact of this business. Men and women will sell their businesses, they'll do different things, and when men and women leave you, it's always ugly. It always feels to me like, because there's a huge connection that you get with these folks that's very powerful. So that's my good, the bad, and the ugly. And the ugly part brings me back to my comment that you're always going to be recruiting, right? You're always going to be in that recruitment mode, and be thoughtful about who you're selecting in the recruitment process, right? You're building a group that's all about, connection and working together. You're building longevity, and you will discover this in the academy training. I believe we said it's been a few years since I've gone through my own training, but I know that speaking with many individuals, candidates that come out of training, they'll tell me the same thing. So I believe it to be true in the UK model as well. And that is that they'll talk to you about the empty chair exercise, right? So this is my second comment, James, and sorry for the long-winded answer, but number one is focus. I'm very focused on this business, right? Don't worry about, they've never heard of us. Who cares? They haven't heard of us in Canada either. And I'm launching more groups with humility. We are launching more groups in Canada than anywhere in the partnership community. Last year, we launched 25 groups. This year, we're launching 34 in our fiscal year. Not being done anywhere else on a per capita basis. If you talk to Sam, he'll tell you the same thing. So I say that with humility, but also with conviction that I know the answer to this. You must be focused, and don't worry about people don't know who I am or have not heard about this. This doesn't matter. The model is way more powerful than the brand, right? The brand will come. So the second point is the empty chair exercise. Be very selective as to who you're allowing in your room, right? There's a process that we follow inside of this model that, you think about the men and women that are sitting around the chairs. So the empty chair exercise is literally that. Imagine a boardroom table. Decide right now, what are the industries that you want around that table? From the industries, almost a mind mapping exercise. Think about the businesses within those industries that you want around there. And then think about the men and women that you want around there, the types of personalities, the characters that are in the room, right? This isn't just filling chairs. This is you being very intentional with what this room looks like, right?
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely great.
I gotta mention this. One of the best ways to overcome that objection is I've never heard of you. I said, listen, Mr. Prospect, how can I say this without offending, that if I check with Vistage Global, if I ask them, will they know who you are?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Excellent point, James. Exactly. Amir, do you have a question for Todd? And then we'll go to Yossi and Jackie. We can't hear you. There we go.
James, you're asking them to join an organization. You can't reverse it and say, who knows you? You're asking them to join an organization. So it's not one-to-one exactly. It's a challenge. It is a real challenge. Let's be clear about that. So I'd like to understand, Todd, thank you for coming on board. I was curious to see that you have Tech Canada in front of you and behind you and not Vistage. So Tech and Vistage are the same entity under a different brand name in different countries around the world.
That's correct. So I think it's around 15 years ago that Vistage changed their name from Tech to Vistage. And there was of the partner countries, slowly, many of them have come on to using the Vistage brand. And of course, any go forward partner countries will now only use Vistage. Tech Canada and Tech Australia are the two holdouts. We've got a strong affiliation, strong connection to Tech, the executive committee, and of course the same with in Australia. They feel
who owns Vistage? Who's the owner of Vistage?
A private equity firm by the name of Providence is the primary owner today. Over the years, there's been various private equity firms, but today it is. Of course, way back in the history, if you go and check out, the story began with Robert Norris. Bob Norris in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, started this in 1957. Was when this
And so why does it keep changing hands, the ownership of this organization? If this is something so powerful, why is it being sold again and again?
So again, the ownership changes that have materialized have, so in terms of again and again, I think it's happened 3 times. So, if you think about an organization that's been around since 1957, that's, I don't know how many, that perhaps
It's a reasonable number.
Yeah. Having said that, it's also generally within private equity firms. And if we just think about, I've got a little bit of background in private equity. Generally speaking, private equity is not there for a long haul. They come in, they believe there's an opportunity to monetize, either increase assets, increase reoccurring revenue, or expand in terms of diversification, and then monetize it. So that's generally the model inside of private equity. And so I would not be surprised, although I have no knowledge, I would not be surprised to hear that one day, because generally it's a 5 to 7 horizon, and I think we're 4 years into the ownership of Providence. So that's how I think about the ownership issue. And it's never become an issue as a build process, by the way. That has never been an issue for certainly for us in Tech Canada. And I would argue that would be the same with you folks, because you're a license holder, right? You're not Vistage in terms of the entity itself. Just like Tech Canada, we're a license holder. We're not Vistage in terms of San Diego.
Yossi, do you have a question for Todd? Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
have 4 more questions whenever you want me to ask them. I can go after Yossi if you like.
Go ahead and ask one more, Amir. Go ahead and ask one more now. Go ahead.
So the accumulated annual fees is about $12,000 for
in
a
Israel.
member. In Israel. And I'm just curious, the little that I know about Israelis, that's not little money to pay $12,000. So I'm thinking, who would be the optimum in your mind, Todd, people to target? Because if these are people that are doing startups, or they have a revenue of $1 million to $5 million, these are very small entities. Who is really the optimum target market that will be willing to pay this and will benefit the most out of the structure of how it works?
Yeah. So great question. I mean, obviously, I don't know the marketplace in Israel. I mean, I'm sure you can all appreciate that. When I hear numbers like 12,000, so I use Canadian numbers, which again, I'm not even sure how they all correlate. Anita probably has a better perspective than Boaz does than I on that. But when I think about in Canada, a CEO member would pay $16,000 per year, right? So if I use the metrics of how we've delivered the service, to your comment, I mean, it's bang on. I mean, that's not inexpensive, right? And if money is an objection at your early discussion, so if you're dealing with individuals that you mentioned startup. I mean, this isn't a startup model. I would stay away from anybody that's at startup. This is about revenue generating organizations that are looking to enhance their experience. You think about the magic of tech or the magic of Vistage. It's still, these are the crystal clear 5 items. These are about men and women that are, looking for making better decisions through the, decision model matrix. They're looking for, being held accountable because they're a going concern business and they want to get better. How do I hold myself accountable, right? They're looking to grow personally and professionally because as a CEO, and I'm sure many of you have come from an environment that's as a business leader, you're wondering, hey, how do I continue my growth experience? I can go to a conference or I can go to an event, but this growth experience is, as we say, it's a layering experience, right? You're constantly developing, and that's certainly what I've recognized people that are attracted to this model would say to us. Isolation factor, I mean, that loneliness, clearly that's what this model does. It overcomes that. And of course, the almighty change, which we all know this world has gone through an awful lot of change in the last, 47 weeks. Who's counting? So when I think about, the essence of your question, though, what I have found in our model in Canada, CEOs or businesses, just to use metrics, this doesn't stand all, across the board, but in our model up here, what we have found is that businesses that are north of $5 million in one metric, top line revenue, and above are the ones that generally are attracted to this. Our small business model is one that it's a lower priced item. It's less time, less money. So I don't think that's where I would be seeing you folks launch. But again, that's obviously up to the conversations with Boaz and Anita, I mean, as to where you go in your modeling. But in Canada, our CEO model is targeted at kind of the sweet spot of businesses between 15 and 40 million. We have members, we have many members that are 100 million and above, but the sweet spot tends to be around that, 15 to 40 million. Because if you think about that from a monetization perspective in those businesses, most businesses would run a successful business generally, unless you're a high volume revenue business that, like a builder or what have you. Most businesses will run at about, 12 to 18% in Canada, EBITDA or operating profit. So, now your affordability on say a $30 million business, now you've got somebody that can actually say, hey, if I get all those value points, those 5 items from this experience, that $12 or $1,000, that's not a lot of money. So I don't know if that helps or not, but hopefully that.
I like to mention something, guys. I'm selling my sales mastery program here for like 13, 14 grand a year US, and people are paying it, like sales professionals, managers, CEOs, easy. They're paying more for their golf, the golf club. Right. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
So again, when I fall into this conversation with my team up here, guys, again, and this correlates across the world. We have an international conference that didn't take place this year, but where all of us come across from across the world. I sit with all the partners and we listen to these stories. As much as we're all different and we come from different cultures and we're all the same, this topic, CEOs and business leaders need this model. And I can assure you that the price, if it's coming up as a big issue for you, you're talking to the wrong person. Move on.
Yeah.
Great point. Great point. And Todd, we will look forward to seeing you in person at Share World in the future. That will be a pleasure for all of us. Yossi, do you have a question for Todd?
Yes. Well, I see the task of recruiting new members to the group as a sales or marketing task. And in each sales or marketing task, you need, when you are approaching your target person that you are going to approach him, you need 2 or 3 major points, very short ones. What will be the benefit and why you should join our group? What would you suggest as 2 or 3 short sentences for this?
Yeah, so again, you're going to learn all about this in the selection interview process, right? So as much as I come from a background of sales and marketing, but although I'm going to tell you that I've never been the guy carrying the sales bag. So until I joined tech, right? In which case I have, now suddenly been presenting myself as, I want you to join my group. So inside of the selection interview process, which you're going to go through with the training. So this is, again, one of my golden rules inside this model. Follow what you're being trained to do. So as much as you all come from great backgrounds, I'm very convinced of that because you wouldn't be in front of me if you didn't. Follow what the training is, even though here's what I hear all the time. I hear great men and women tell me, oh, I do it my way. I can do it. I've already got my thing. I'm very successful. I can do it my way. We're talking about decades of experience. Listen to these trainers and follow what they say. The selection interview is 3-stage process, right? So I cut it into 20, or it's an hour long. So if I was just meeting Boaz and I would immediately, and he's the king at this, by the way, I would sit in the conversation with Boaz and I would want him to tell me all about himself. So my first 20 minutes to answer your question, really, I don't go in with a sales topic. I don't go in with, oh, let me tell you why you should go join my group. I go in to understand who Boaz is. Boaz, where are you from? Tell me more about you, right? Have you always been in the dentist business? Tell me more about how did that get started? Where's your father brought this business here? Tell me more about that. The first 20 minutes, I learn everything I can about him. And that's my golden rule. And you're going to learn that in the selection interview process. Avoid the temptation to become salesy, getting into your pitch, or here's why you should. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for that. And so I do not lead with anything like that. I lead with my first 20 minutes Thank you for agreeing to have a cup of coffee with me. I'd love to hear more about you. And by the way, Boaz will say to me, if he's, like every other business owner, he'll say, well, tell me about that tech thing. I don't know anything about it. Tell me about Vistage. I don't know. You know what? I want to share that with you, but really what I'd really like to do right now is learn more about you. And I got to tell you, as Boaz knows more than anybody, people love to talk about themselves. So they will. They will tell you more and more and more. After 20 minutes, I transition. And my transition sounds something like this, right? Boaz, it sounds so interesting to me about your business and what you're doing. And can I share a little bit with you about Tech Canada and what we're all about inside this environment? Because I think it might be something that interests you. He's going to say yes. And then I'm going to tell him the story of tech. It's not a sales pitch. I'm putting hand over heart and telling him stories. That's what I was saying earlier on. Get your stories, right? So my story always is something like, I didn't know anything about this thing called Tech Canada. I met this woman, a mutual friend, went out for dinner. She started telling me about tech. They told me about these things called magic and talked about making better decisions and then I heard a story about a member. When I was building my first group, I told stories of what I heard. I heard the story about a member that went through this, and I thought, wow, that's incredible, right? So I'm talking about the value proposition. The value proposition inside of Vistage is the magic, right? That's those 5 things. Know that. You got to know that making better decisions, holding people accountable, personal and professional growth, isolation, change. So those 5 things, you got to know that, and you got to tell stories around that. So here's how I do it specifically. Boaz, somewhere in his 20-minute story, he told me, I'm making this up, Boaz, work with me, okay? Right? He says to me somewhere in that story, he says, he says, the biggest challenge I have is ever since we had to let go my right-hand man, or my board changed, or he tells me something. So I've never felt, more isolated. Oh, he says a word like that. So then my story that I share with him is, Boaz, you shared with me, when I was listening to you about all your story, it's amazing. What you did share with me is about isolation. Can I share with you a story about how Tech Canada actually breaks that down and eliminates that? So then I go into our proven process, right? What's the proven process of Vistage? You have one-to-one meetings where you're going to meet with your men and women for 2 hours of a conversation that's all about them and their business and, working through. It's a very, intentional process. Then you're going to have group meetings, 8 hours where a group of men and women come together. And they're going to have this experience. Tell me where isolation is in that. Like, we're going to break down isolation. You're never going to feel lonely again, right? So I thread in stories of the value proposition into the 4 proven process, the pillars of success, into what I heard in that first 20 minutes. And then the last 20 minutes, so that first 20, second 20 is all about the value to your question. The last 20 is how I transition into, Boaz, you're somebody that I think would do great in our group. I would like to invite you to a discussion with my other members, or if he's one of my first members, I'd like you to be, here's the key phrase, Boaz, I would really love this conversation. I'd like you to consider being my founding member. I want you to be the first.
I think you all just heard one of the most incredible outlines of an hour with a potential member that we have heard in months. Todd, I recently did my 1800th Vistage Tech meeting in 18 years. And not because I'm a great speaker, but as Todd knows, a fair portion of my presentations, I'm listening. Remember, Todd, when we met with your group, the first portion is, I had everybody tell about themselves. Where are you from originally? What brought you here? Do you have a family? What do you do? My dearly departed Jewish mother's 5 questions. So the first 20 minutes, just let them talk. Use my mother's line, tell me more. Right, Todd? Just tell me more. And then go to the second and third portion. And I think James would agree with me. This is the heart of everything. Excellent question, Yossi. Jackie, do you have a question for Todd?
Yes. Hi, Todd. Great listening to you. Really very informational and super stuff. Gold nuggets you're giving us.
Thank you.
One question, and forgive me for using a term that's in the news a lot now, a false positive. But what would you say when you went into Tech Canada, when you started, what was the major thing that you thought would be true and wasn't, or thought wouldn't be true and was, and helped you out there or got you stuck?
Yeah, great question, Jackie. I mean, it kind of springboards off of what I was saying earlier on, where when I was trained, they gave me lots of insights about what I could expect, and I didn't believe that. I thought, isn't this kind of like consulting? Isn't it like, I'm going to meet people. It's going to be all about, bring out your balance sheet and your income statement, and we'll just kind of go through that. And that's true. There's some of that elements takes place. But what I've learned in business, and maybe it was, well, I've learned in an intense manner in this model. I always knew in business, there's only two things that ever happen in business, right? Only two things, right? There's two issues. One is people, and the other one is money. And you can take all of the things that thread off of that. So when I think about, getting into this business, I was very focused on the business. We're going to do strategic planning. We're going to think about, all the different issues there. As we know, people, culture, vision. That's what your CEOs are supposed to be doing. They're working on their people all the time. They're working on their culture. I believe that culture is a thing, rather it's not a thing. It's just a byproduct of associating yourself with core values and behaviors. So when you think about behaviors, and if a CEO turns to you and says, "Hey, I'm really struggling with culture in my company," you're going to be talking all about people. And then, as we all appreciate in life, people are very dynamic and they're always surprising. So as you get into these conversations, I have constantly been just taken back by, oh, we're dealing with that topic. I mean, I have, again, in my own coaching practice with, as I said, I had many men and women, once upon a time, 4 groups, and had topics, everything from, a personal guarantee that suddenly was being called and the individual can't pay it and he's going to lose his house. Or all the way to another person sat in front of me and told me that family tragedy struck. And another person's, divorces. Another person sat in front of me, an unbelievable wedding experience. These are moments in life that people either want to celebrate or they feel lost from. I mean, here's a way to, I guess, further answer this question, and it's so relevant to today. So we went into this pandemic, 47 weeks ago, and I can tell you that Dr. Tanner and I, a founder, 35 years in this model, he and I had many conversations about, recessionary times and how this model has, and I've got all the data to support this. In recessionary times in Canada, this model grew. Go figure. So when times are tough, people need this model even more. Surprise, right? And then, of course, we're having the conversation, at the beginning of last year, thinking, what about a pandemic? Well, Dr. Tanner's never been through a pandemic, nor have I. So we're looking at this thinking, what's going to happen? We grew. We grew during the pandemic. And the reason why, so again, surprise, the reason why, if you think about it, when we're just talking about what this model is all about, people need the human connection. They need to have a room full of non-threatening, non-supply. This is not about, raising your glass and clinking your glass at a networking event. Go do that. Do that somewhere else. This is about people having a human connection, about personal and professional growth. That was my surprise. I didn't realize the power of this model when you get that right room filled together with people engaging. It's unstoppable.
Yeah. And Todd, I've been there many times when, our agreement in the room is everything here stays in the room. Everything's confidential. And I've heard people express things. I had one member come into the meeting when I started speaking one morning. He looked disheveled, and we said, "What's wrong?" He said, "My daughter was just in a car wreck and I may have to leave the room at any moment." I said, "Don't leave the room. Take all calls right here. We're here to support you." He took 2 or 3 calls. People were right there to support him. And that's how this works. It's beyond explanation of the strength of what happens in the confidential atmosphere. It's just terrific. And I don't want to miss the point of what Todd said a while ago. When you're talking to prospects, tell stories. All you have to do is go on the Vistage website. Look at some of the videos and you've got that story, right, Todd? You tell that person's story. Let me tell you about so-and-so in Canada. Let me tell you about so-and-so. Anita, aren't we lucky to have Todd with us today? Do you have a question for Todd, Anita?
It's very interesting. I can only support what Todd said about the support group. Todd, in Israel, we have mandatory service in the Israeli Defense Force. So it's very similar, when you get to a group like this and you go through so many situations where you risk your life to that extent, you become so, the bond is so strong. And what I've heard from my boss, who is a CEO for the last 20 years in his business, he was struggling with a legal issue a year ago. And thanks God, we came out of this. He said to me, it's very similar to the experience I had in the Israeli Defense Force. The group of Vistage CEOs were for me, and they helped me. And because they knew me for so many years, almost 12 years, it was so easy for me to get them step in and give me a hand and help me with either advice or loaning some money or whatever to help him, with their experience. And so it's very similar to the experience Israelis go through in the military. So it's the bond, it's the connection. And unfortunately with COVID-19, we're isolated. Obviously, we're doing this via Zoom. But I truly believe when Boaz and I spoke about whether it's a good time to start Vistage Israel, we both came to conclusion this is the best time ever because of everything that is going on. We just need to get to the right people and engage them and reach out to the people who are willing and see the opportunity and possibilities and not the challenges and difficulties. So
yeah, it's what you're sharing with me, Anita, completely resonates. And again, just maybe a comment or two, but I remember during so the whole world's experienced various times of complete isolation, on again, off again, the roller coaster ride of sorts. So each one of us, and obviously we're all longing for, I guess, Israel's ahead of the game in terms of the vaccines and what have you, as to what I'm reading globally. So I mean, it's awesome, and we're all longing for that day. What I would share with you that not unlike what when we started this pandemic, I had, because my mantra in life as CEO is 40, 60, 6. So, and just to let you know these metrics, I will always have 40 building chairs. That's my target. Today I have 36 building chairs, so I'm slightly off, but 40 building chairs. I want 60% of those 40 building chairs successful within 6 months. Now, the rest of them can be successful later on, but that's my 40, 60, 6. That's my mantra as CEO. And by the way, I'm still chairing one group, right? So just in case you're thinking that I'm sitting here talking to you today only as the CEO of Tech Canada, I transitioned 3 of my groups to other chairs here in the city of Calgary. And I said, if I'm going to be CEO, I'm still going to be a chair. So today I still chair one group. Actually, Boaz spoke to that group recently, a year or so ago, a couple of years ago. So back to your point, though, is that, we didn't know, like coming into this, as to, how is this going to work? That bond that you're referring to, I mean, it's so powerful. And that's exactly what materialized for us. Here's the story, true story. 9 of the groups so our fiscal year ends in September. So we launched 9 I told you we had 25 within the last fiscal. 9 of those groups launched during the quarantine, during the pandemic. Wow. So they never met each other. They'd only met each other this way. And they had already started to form a bond. And now, of course, they're on again, off again. They had some hybrid meetings. They've had some in-person meetings. What they started to do, things like they call it a tailgate party. They'd meet in a park when they could socially distance and stand around in a circle. Just the bond. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, they did this way, right? I mean, who knew?
Exactly.
Now, and Todd, this group that we have on the screen is an exact example of that, because that's how we've been meeting in the last few months, and we have formed a bond in this group. And Amir, did you have another question for Todd that you wanted to ask? You said you had a couple of different questions. So if there's something else before we adjourn for today. We can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Todd, what are the different revenue sources for a chair that you have identified the ability to generate additional revenues?
Wonderful. Okay. So here's what I tell every one of my chairs is that this environment, and I truly learned this, is that here the byproduct. Now, again, I mean, I see Sandler Training up with James in terms of, so I trust that you're involved with Sandler Training. I know that program quite well. So you will all be involved with, I know you are, different things. Now, I said to you at the onset, your path to being successfully launched is focus. So as much as I was doing other things, I'm a trained facilitator, in DISC personality assessment, Patrick Lenciano's work on 5 dysfunctions of a team. I'm a trained facilitator in that work. I was doing many other things other than my tech practice when I first started, but I cleared the table and said, I want to get focused on this. I would need to get launched. Doesn't do me any good until my group gets launched. So I got launched. Here's the byproduct of value, right? Now, we don't tell you this anywhere in your chair contract that you'll sign, and we don't, this is not written down anywhere. But Dr. Tanner and I have talked about this at length, and it's the absolute residual gain that you experience by being a chair within your community. Can you imagine the story that I was telling other people that were considering working with me as a consultant or a trainer doing other work in my chair practice at my height when I had 65, 68 CEOs and business owners that I work with in the city of Calgary? The story that I could share with them and say, look, I have experience working with, 65 plus CEOs and business owners in the city of Calgary. You're considering hiring me to do some work for DISC or for Patrick Lenciano's work or Sandler training. Your value just climbs. I mean, the intrinsic value through this model. So if you want to equate it to dollars, I was able to charge day rates in my consulting practice that nobody else could touch. And I was sought after because of the anchoring element of Vistage or tech. No question.
I have a question.
I like that kind of answer.
I have two questions. Question number one, you can answer it later. Do you know my colleague Hamish Knox from Calgary?
I don't, but I'm going to make a mental note and see if maybe I'll bump into that individual.
Awesome. And two, you mentioned DISC. Do you find, I'm a huge DISC fan, enthusiast. I think it's awesome. Do you find there are specific DISC styles that tend to gravitate towards these type of groups? Or do you feel it's really across the board?
Well, if, again, now you'd get me into my training mode of DISC, right? So I won't go there on you, but, any personality assessment tool, whether it's Myers-Briggs or colors or animals or DISC, obviously I'm partial to DISC. It sounds like you are as well, James, but the spectrum of leadership, the spectrum of engagement is not isolated to a particular personality style. What I do with my members, this is a Todd thing, not a tech thing or a Vistage thing, because I'm a certified specialist in DISC, every one of my members take the DISC personality assessment so that I know who I'm working with. Because as you appreciate in personality, that's one of the ways that, again, Boaz knows this stuff better than anybody. But so when I think about, engaging with somebody, I mean, the transformation of me showing up and respecting who I'm talking to in order to have a more meaningful engagement. As I say, leadership, my definition of leadership is influencing outcomes. That's all I think leadership is. I'm just constantly influencing outcomes. So in order to do that, the only way I can do that is begin with self-awareness. So if I'm self-aware of personality, then I know that when I meet James, I got to kind of, who is this guy? How does he show up? And if I want to have a more meaningful connection with you, then I've got to kind of be in your space. I can't expect you to come to me. I got to go to you. So at the end of the day, if you look at my room today, my 12 CEOs that are in my group today, they are all around the DISC circumplex. And they're all great guys, fantastic people.
Awesome.
Any other questions for Todd as we come near the end of our time with him today? Anybody else? Well, all I can say is that I am so honored. I remember back when we first met, Todd, in that boardroom in that resort in Vancouver. I remember the moment. You have a warmth about you and a caring that is just so genuine and so very, very special. And every time we've seen each other, and I've been to Tech Canada headquarters in Calgary, and the team that Todd has put together is just phenomenal. So Todd, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you over the years and your encouragement. It has just been a blessing in my life. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Boaz. Thank you, Anita. Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure meeting you. I wish you
Thank you, Todd.
Nothing but great success. I'm very sure that as you begin this journey, as I said, it will be the most rewarding experience you've ever had in your life. I wish you great success. You're with obviously two individuals that are going to guide you through this process. And we, as you will find, we are a community that wants to support you. So if you get off this call and you think, I should have asked Todd this, Boaz knows how to get a hold of me, reach out to me. I'd be happy to help any one of you, as I've helped people across the world, whether they be in Spain or Germany or UK or wherever. So I'm happy to help you. Good luck to you.
Todd,
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you
Todd, if that's okay with you, I'll share your email address if they have a question, if that's okay with you. And Todd, a final question. Have you and your wife ever been to Israel?
We have not, and it's on my radar. I mean, and of course, that's one spot that I definitely need to get to. And of course, when the world allows us to travel again, I mean,
We can give you a vaccine here when you come.
Oh, I would love to. Right.
Todd, what you do, you've got tour guides all around the screen. We will all show you around. And one day we will look forward to having you come and maybe speak to one of our meetings of all the members in Israel. It would be such an honor.
Absolutely.
I would be there in a heartbeat, Boaz. You know that for sure. So thank you very much, guys.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank
Thank you,
Todd.
everyone.
You,
We will
you.
talk to you all later. Thank you, Todd. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye. Well, as you all can see, there's another amazing contribution to our future. And Todd's email address will be in your email shortly. So if you have any questions for him, reach out. He is just an incredible leader, just incredible. How many of you all found this valuable today? I thought it was awesome. I thought it was just awesome. And so Yossi, you, Anita, and James and Amir will be going through Chair Academy this week. I will be joining you for the first 30 minutes, late tomorrow night at 1:30 Dallas time. There's sort of a coffee introduction. So I'll be joining you for the first 30 minutes, and I'll be going through the Academy in April, hopefully when the quarantine is over and I can come to Israel. But anyway, we will see you all later, and looking forward to a great week for you. Thank you, James. Thank you, Yossi.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye.